an informal chat, it's not a lecture, so how would you like to do it? Do you want to come down or is there anyone to sit down? Sit on the floor. There have been endless amounts of competitions for different parts of the square, and those became, reached the stage and they had to be, and I don't know, sadly enough, those two monuments which have recently been built on Trafalgar Square, I think are really architectural catastrophes. So you can judge it for yourself and you can argue that it's not the case. But I think it comes to the point when we have to stop and just to say to ourselves what we would do if we were given a chance. You have got only 4 days to do it, so, and you have got a weekend in between, and you are quite ready to work with you over the weekend if you have the time. But what we would like you to look at, first of all, at the concept of Trafalgar Square as such, because architecturally it has never been an architectural monument. It's not like St. Paul's, it's not a good set of buildings altogether apart from the church in the left-hand corner. And the monument for all the buildings are really mediocre buildings. But a few years ago there was a chance to do something about it. And the best architects in London entered competitions and young child was involved. And as a result of that we have got one building which has been rebuilt to its original shape, which as we go through the slide, it's really absolutely totally awful. There was absolutely nothing interesting about it, and it made the office building, which was used this for, it makes it badly functioning, and it had to be, the floor had to be slightly increased in height, so there was a lot of forceful messing up, and that is the right way for it done in order to make the building transfer to the requirement of the 20th century. The next building is the building which I think was one of those competitions which were submitted and done by all the good architects in London. Eventually, somebody won the competition. I think he got it in the books, and the decision was taken that the building was not good enough. An American architect was appointed by the client in order to avoid the problem of giving it to another architect who would be English and who would not be, wouldn't have been involved in the original competition. And now we have got an extension to the National Gallery, which is a building which is really of no interest to anybody. It's built and it's made of materials which all probably will last and stand up for ages. You can say that the lighting punishes, but architecturally it hasn't really contributed to the history of or even to the complexity of the design when it comes to buildings, to house pieces of art. So if we just will show you two pictures, and I just would say one more thing about the third side. The third side is really a side which is a side which I'm, in my personal experience, I'm very close to, which is a site for a floating structure. And in 1979 there was a competition which was organized by the Great London Council to develop a floating structure which would make a boat terminal in order to use the river as transportation. And the competition again had about 500 entries. And I was working at that for Louis Roscoe, and since we spent a long time working with Eva Jiricna and had an experience of working floating structures, so we produced a scheme which won the competition. We got a letter from GRC saying that we were doing it. And of course, GRC did not own a particular piece of water, so they could not develop any building at all. I'm not saying that was in 1979, so I'm not saying that what we have done was a very nice building, but it was definitely an approach in that period that it should be a building which would have nautical character and which would just make this particular piece of water function, take people off those boats and provide some entertainment and refreshment for tourists and people using the river for transportation only. And later on, So nothing happened immediately after. Now the competition has been recently revived, and the scheme which was presented to Royal Finance Commission, which I was hoping to show you, but unfortunately they wouldn't give it to us, is a classical building which is floating, inflated, whatever. Because again, the same principle which has been applied to all the buildings, and has happened again. James Charles criticized the building, and he criticized it on the basis of this argument. There is 6 meters standard distance. So the building goes up and down 6 meters, 20 feet with the tide. When it goes up, and the high tide lasts for about 45 minutes, water is high. At that point, there is a view from a piece of embankment, which is about 50 meters or less, from the embankment towards St. Paul's Cathedral. And the building obliterates at that point the view for about 45 minutes, and only twice a year, because the high kilometer line only happens twice a year. So now the building which has been designed is actually designed as a platform, which has got 2 classical towers. One of them is the old terminal, and the other one is sold a concession. And the Royal Finance Commission are holding this scheme up and stopping from giving them the blessing to build it. So these schemes have got missing similar in nature. Now the questions which we would like to put to you are, first of all, what is it what makes modern architecture so unattractive to the clients? What have we done wrong?
In Britain. In Britain.
In Britain. Right. Because if you think about it, we have got exactly the same means as the classical or any traditional architect has to build a good building. Now the only way how people can see the way out of each other is to copy the classical buildings. And copy them badly, because you can never, copies are always copies, you can never understand the thinking of the period of time copy. So instead of trying to understand why the buildings, why the articulation, why the selection of materials, by the way how the program was approached. I mean, all those things which come into it, which we would like to leave to you and discuss it at the end of this project again. I see that many people think that modern architecture cannot satisfy any of those requirements to produce the right and easy environment. And therefore, the clients try to, and that is Prince Charles' point as well. So they think that only by copying classical architecture you can resolve problems of city planning, town planning, and the actual design of how it goes. And the second thing, I think, we would like to give you a feel to look at whichever part of the project you are in. When you want to look at the apartment square as a unit, which is related to other parts of London and connected to the other schemes which you are looking at, or when you want to look at it as an individual problem of developing a particular site, or when you want to just look at it as a theoretical problem of what kind of buildings would be suitable for these particular sites, which are such a great exposure to criticism and which are really hard design-wise, because they are so closely related to the existing environment. Now we'll go through the slides of the buildings and we show you a couple of compositions. One of them is a joke, which composition which I did in 30 years ago for one of the sites of the
taking this morning, it's a bit grey. Makes bad buildings look worse.
Look at the rest of the disorganized
It's a real disaster. It's a typical shame in Britain to get a square that is a major monument, but you have to risk life and limbs to actually get over to big division. Gallery actually tied in the river through a pedestrian link at Northampton and down to Leicester Square, which is often picked up in some of the blue we've been given. And it is those connections of various buildings and various proposals that can start to change a city. And I think we've suffered a classic problem of having two individual buildings built on a square, totally independent of each other, that have actually put absolutely zero back into the city, into the people in particular. That's one of the important things that I find interesting about the square, is that there's nothing in London for people, no processes, no promenades, no links to other areas of the city.
I would like to say that actually at this similarity in London, at one stage, Vineco for one part of the square, so that would be true.
I definitely hope so, yes. There's been enough opportunity.
Yeah.
So there was one last year for celebration for something against apartheid, where you can transform the square for 24 hours. That was quite a fun project as well. But actually pretty contemporary structure. It's happening to go under cladding, which is probably looks better because it's scaffolding. But there are major vistas and major views onto the square that aren't a formal exercise. It's a very scattered square, very strange views. But on the various projects, particularly on ground buildings, there's a lot of conflicting views to various major other monuments that you can respond to or use as a departure from your various designs, and how they then affect the monument itself. Ground buildings and also National Gallery, both buildings that aren't just facades and have got back ends that are pedestrian routes to other major points in the city, but both have actually turned the back on it and created an arse end to each building. Both are cladding very expensive materials onto the square, but you get around the back and they're all cladding free. Sticks in my throat. Gibbs Church starts to look a bit forlorn and short and really needs a bit more respect. Splendid little cafe in the basement as well. So work visit, site visit tomorrow morning. That's looking down toward murky houses of Parliament. That's actually down White. It's amazing what you put up with the junk that's around the square. You only notice when you're looking at the sills, when you're walking around the place.
Slightly low, because in order to have properly serviced floor, they have to increase the height of the floors, and that they have to go small, so it's all the way
None of it's left, none of the shops are open, you can't get into the attic, it's just a blank block in place.
Actually, that's a picture. If you look at it, what an architect of the 20th century would say to the building, there are so many aspects to it. For example, looking at the glass walls, and that is a complete importance. If you cannot produce a link between those two buildings, which would produce anything else but a reflection of the existing building, it's possibilities around these 20 years ago, but that was a completely different context. And those openings which are out of proportion, those classic flows which melt up, which absolutely show the detail of those massive gates which are out of scale, and no articulation.
It's actually putting a blank facade on the square, a great opportunity of actually lifting people up onto another level of a public building and give them a view over
you have found the Strand?
Obviously not warranted as a major location in London.
Just a complete definition. Yeah, I'm not so sure that looking at this picture, I have a question, but I've seen that those chimneys.
I've got service towers on the top.
There are service towers on the top, yes, I think that is the only improvement. What is really, yes,
I didn't have lifts in the original.
I have to tell you, I feel really painful showing you these pictures because the person who did it is somebody who I know for 25 years since I first came to the country, who was closely working with Lincolnshire in 1968, and who was a job architect on the building, this aluminium building by Lincolnshire, so in Park Road, which is a decent site. So, the way of, I don't know whether it was a question of winning the competition or any mistake, or whether he just completely changed his view on what happened to him, because he really is a nice guy.
Looking up Northumberland Avenue from the river to the back end. So it's actually a very large site when you look at it on the plan. It's a big long site and it's got corners and angles at various points. And there were schemes by one of his phrases, Yankee Bullington's Blob, which he did to this site, which a lot of you probably know. And also Richard Gordon's, which was a remarkable elephant scheme, which would be a great asset. Back down the Strand towards that.
Another one building as well, just looking at the left side.
Oh, pretty much so much. Also views down from Gibbs Church.
And this is the site of Westminster Pier. This is the pier which I think has been in existence for I don't know how many years, and which has been constantly sinking because the flotation has been continuously debilitating its layer of plastic hull. And it has been, in 1979 they saw it taken out the guarantee steel slab for it. Now, I don't know how many years later, it's still floating and still producing absolutely no progress. And the river is a very, very important element in this world. And that is the site where the structure should be. And between the second and the third T, there is a piece of the mainland from which the view towards and forward the building.
Second and third. Make a note of that. Yellow. I was looking back up to the Westminster Bridge, so it's actually quite again a prominent site against National Landmark. Dead opposite the old GLC building. They haven't really got far to look if they didn't know where it was going to be. That's another travesty. There's GLC on the side of the river. Great place to walk, but nobody walks there. Here we are, getting another back end. That's generally a site plan. That was just his main axis lines of the view, or the main route from Buckingham Palace throughout the arch hits the corner of Grand Buildings. Then the parallel line up Northumberland Avenue that hits the centre of Nelson's Column, and then another point across to the dome on the National Gallery. So there are a lot of axes, a lot of views, a lot of potential to that site with people walking through the building with glimpses of framing views, all of which have been totally ignored.
Just when you look at the second one there, it's actually quite interesting that those German buildings occupied a charts have been completely made.
Richard's scheme
Richard's
actually
scheme
did
used it.
a glass atrium on that front section, straight on across at the top there. So it's like a New York winter garden where you can actually sit on the border around the square and look across at all the various views. It'd be very nice.
Now that is a joke which I mentioned before. It was a competition which was organized by the manufacturer who made corrugated cladding. And it was
Robinson's, not the marmalade.
Yeah.
It was ideas competition for the development of the site. Now, the reason I think it is a joke, but also actually there is something else which made us put those pictures on the screen. The site, when it was empty before the National Gallery was developed, was a landscape site which made a very pleasant link between Leicester Square and Trafalgar Square, and which was really very much used by people because there is nowhere to go between those two squares. There is no landscape there. So the site was really extremely popular and it was being used, but in a very pleasant way. It was used by people who sit in the was closed down. And so when I did this competition, I think the first thing which I saw was a great importance to preserve the site. Now, that thing was not called an extension to the National Gallery, but it was called something to do with, I call it GBH, which was Great British Hospice, but I can't remember what it was the tourist center for people who come to Trafalgar Square and who want to relax and watch the The competition was done in 2 stages, and so the first stage, which was just 2 sheets of paper, were associated images on that plan, and both the fourth tower, which was then be surrounded by inflated balloons, which was meant to be a flexible element, which was then be colored and lit. And those balloons would house platforms on which various things would happen. That would be a little pad from which the airships would take off, because that's the only way how we can easily get to the top. So some balloon on the top is viewing platforms and there's another there platform.
It's all yours. Leave them upside down. Doesn't matter.
And that is the best way to see it. And those 2 little E-shapes, which are now A-shapes, they are telescopic digits holding the structure to the embankment, because if it goes up and down, that is 6 meters in general. So the structure has to be held to the embankment and move up and down. There is also one thing that if you do floating structure, water doesn't produce the same steady foundation like buildings like that. So it not only runs from side to side, but also from top to bottom. So whatever you, in terms of roofing material, everything is stretched in all sorts of directions. So the idea about liberating was to put an umbrella kind of above steel frame, which would make the building protected from water, so everything else in the jars open up or they are not completely watertight. And also it's extremely light, so we don't there's a problem with stretching, but I don't know. And we start to text the water tank was used with a boat tank from which people just would get on the boats. And the other deck has concessions because a bit thin. Now this is the situation with the low side, so you can see that those elements which are steel boxes which you can push in and pull out in order to replace them and holding the steel frame. So they are almost sitting in the middle there. And when the water is high, this is when the building covers Can you just confirm before we carry on talking about the project, how many of you are you doing or are you involved on another continuous project? What would be a chance of building this Trafalgar Square as an extension to your project? Most of you doing anything, because I only came back this morning, so I have no idea what you're doing.
I think we're all involved in a free project. And then there's another project that's just presented this week, which is on Friday. And some of us are involved in that as well. So
Which project we are involved in?
So you think that you would like to add it to what you are doing already if you want to touch this problem at all? Because I don't really know how to say that the best way of working because actually what would be a good idea if whoever gets involved in this project, if we at the end of those 4, 5, 6 days or whatever, if we can pull together everybody's idea and everybody's observation and see when we can pull various points in and see when it makes a consistent story. Because actually that is what would make sense because everybody in limited number of experience, come from different countries, has got different views, and actually if we just try to discuss it and put it together, so we might have an interesting discussion at the end of it. And we might actually carry on doing the same, applying the same problem which we mentioned before, why modern architecture making it so unacceptable for people, locals who like it, and why. We don't like it either, I don't see any of you in this room who like what was shown on the screen. But why is it? Why are we all doing it? Are we so incompetent as opposed to people who lived before us? Or are the clients so bad? Or I'm not going to continue the discussion at this point because I would like you to come up and then we can have a discussion at the end of it. But, so that we might just to come up with some ideas which might be less together as a biased statement. Over. We don't mind if you want to extend it, because obviously we are working on this project, so I'm sure that you can find the time to work with an individual if you want to build it in whichever to make a final discussion. I don't know what would be the chance of making this final discussion at the end of it.
Well, as I see it and sort of listening, and there are sort of 3 groups that sort of set up to sort of be a base that followed through, absorbing what turned out really is Peter Wilson and you coming to have a concentrated input. And And I think what, in a way, your projects, and I'm not sure how many, I think that I'm sort of talking for the group, one of the groups in a way, and then students from the other groups I think need to, as I don't think there's any staff here, need to sort of have some kind of come back as well. But what you're talking about, and then, I mean the group that I can sort of talk about is taking the Strand, sort of a relationship between the Strand and the river as two major exploited kind of arteries in London. And most of it's been dealt with in terms of sections and the relations between them. And obviously Trafalgar Square is the major kind of entrance to the Strand, which no one actually has taken on. They sort of stopped before that. So the issue of that entrance or the extension is kind of critical in Trafalgar Square. The other issue in them is the river itself, and the idea that it actually can become a major space and develops a major kind of space for London, which starts to kind of engage your third project. The sort of strategy we're adopting really is Richard's proposal for putting the traffic underground on the embankment. So the whole kind of issue of that artificial edge of the river becomes sort of redundant. The whole questioning of what this kind of force that pervades the surface of the earth that enters and leaves London becomes quite critical. And so, and almost sort of as your kind of third side, if one thinks of it as the river, I mean, it does become a really interesting, and as you're pointing to all of those projects. I'm not sure on the South Bank, maybe there's a student who can talk about what the South Bank with Cedric and Ron, how relevant the river in that respect is in terms of how using Eva and John and Mark can become a sort of extension and embellishment of what you're doing. I can see you looking confused, so you're obviously one. But the nice, I think the lovely thing about the summer school, as against perhaps the normal workings of the AA, which kind of isolates units and difference and so forth, is that it's a really lovely kind of atmosphere where there are people coming in from all different positions, and the students are the ones that come holding it all. And I think